No? Nothing? Okay, hold on a second. Let me make sure it's gonna share. All right, there we go. All right, cool. Well, I went down this weekend to y'all heard of Dragon Con? It's a big event. It happens in Atlanta every year. It's been going on like, I don't know, 20, 25 years, maybe closer to 30. It's a like sci-fi fantasy convention. It's like one of the biggest conventions, like Comic-Con and stuff like that. But Dragon Con is like anything and everything. It's movies, it's comics, it's video games, it's everything. So we used to go down and watch the parade, but then it got too crowded. So we stopped doing that. But my husband's aunt comes from Virginia every year and brings her grandson, and they go to Dragon Con. That's what they do. They've been doing it since he was like 10 years old. He's probably close to 30 now. But they do it every year. So we always go down and pick her up or both of them up if he wants to come and go to dinner. So that's what we did on Saturday is we went down to Dragon Con and looked at all the crazy. Everybody's walking around in costumes. It's all cosplay. The whole event's cosplay. So we got to watch all the fun and crazy costumes and pick her up and go to dinner, and that was fun. Vietnam thing.
Because my friends will be.
Oh, like Vietnamese or like a Vietnam War veteran?
Like a, yeah.
So like a Vietnamese festival or something? Oh, that sounds cool.
At the Catholic.
At the Catholic Church. Sounds like fun.
We saw that dragon.
Yeah, there's a Dragon Con's huge. It's in downtown Atlanta and it is absolutely huge. All right, well, let's get ourselves started with our lesson. So today, this is the last lesson of Unit 2. Sorry, it's lesson 4. It's the last lesson of Unit 2, which means you'll have a test after this lesson for Unit 2. It's also our halfway point in first quarter. So you've made it an eighth of the way through the year, halfway through first quarter. So that's pretty good. We're getting there. We're moving along. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to give you all of your second quarter materials. So you'll get all of your binder stuff for Q2. Sit up a little, Emerson, so that Everly has some room, please. Thank you, ma'am. All right, so we're talking ecology. This is our last of our ecology lessons today, and we're going to talk first about how the landscape can change and how that impacts everything that is a part of that ecosystem. So a changing landscape is our first section here. So what do humans use for food and for housing that can create waste products too? What do we use? What's the word that describes the things that we use for food and for housing? Does anybody know? So we're looking for resources. So humans use resources, right? For food, for housing. So let's look at this little church here and let's look at what we can see just in this picture. What is a resource that humans might have used to build that church? What do you see? What do you see, Everly? Wood's a good, yeah, wood's the obvious one, right? And how about what are the windows made of? Oh, everybody glass. Yeah, and where do you get glass from? Sand, right? You heat sand up really hot and you can get glass because there's silica in the sand, and it's the silica we use to make glass. And then I see a little like a rock wall maybe, or maybe like a little retaining area. So those are just rocks taken from nature and moved to a different location. So yeah, and then inside that church, there's probably all kinds of things. There's probably electricity, and so there's probably copper in there, and then there's probably some rubber and plastic that wrap those electrical wires, and that can come from petroleum, for example. So there are lots of resources just to build that one little tiny church. And the whole kind of theme of this slideshow is it's sort of a fall autumn themed because it's September 1st. We want to start thinking about fall, right? Want the heat to go away? Anybody else ready for the heat to go away? Yes, have some pretty fall leaves. Yes. All right, so let's talk about some environmental issues. So resource use, we just talked about the things that we used to build that little church there. Think about the things that are used to build your house or the clothing you wear. Those are resources. So we have to use our resources. And then how can that affect the populations of not just the animals, but the plants too that live in a particular area? Look at them. Aren't they cute? I saw a video on Instagram the other day of a mama raccoon climbing down a tree, and there were 4 little babies coming out of a hole behind her. They were all climbing down the little tree, and they looked so cute. It's like a little train of raccoons. All right, and then pollution. Obviously, our day-to-day life can produce waste, and if it's not managed properly, that can cause pollution issues. You ever been to an area where there's water, a recreation area, and you see like all the bottles and the trash washed up on the shore? You ever seen it like that and been like, oh man, I've seen it, and it makes me very sad because it's gross. Yuck.
Where do they put the trash in?
So trash, they do different things with trash. So some trash is put into landfills, where it's just like a designated area. Go back. It's a designated area for the trash. So at least you're containing it. And then sometimes they will incinerate it, they'll burn it, which does produce some gas that isn't great for the environment and smoke and things like that. But you have to do something with the trash. Now, here's an interesting thing. So I'm from Virginia Beach, right? That's where I grew up. Virginia Beach is flat, it is at sea level, completely flat, because it's right at the ocean, right? We have one hill, and it's a man made hill. It's the highest land point in the city of Virginia Beach, and it's right off the interstate, and it's called Mount Trashmore. I'm not kidding you, this is a real story. It was the city dump for many, many years, and they piled the trash up really high, and they're like, why did we put the city dump like right in the middle of the city? That was dumb. What do we do? So they turned it into a recreation area. They covered it in dirt, they put grass over it, it has the big city seal on the front, and now it's this big grassy mountain. It's not a mountain, really, it's a hill in the middle, like right in the middle of the town. Okay. And, but when I was in probably 5th or 6th grade, there was a problem because it was all that trash that they had just buried and covered up. And it started to, as it started to decay, one of the byproducts was a gas that was producing gas, like methane gas, I think in particular, which is very flammable. And it was starting to come up to the surface and crack, and it could catch fire, so it wasn't a good idea. So they had to drive these big pipes down into the mountain to let the gas come out so that it wouldn't like explode the whole mountain onto the interstate. So you can do different things with trash, and that was a creative way to go about it. So can anybody define natural resources for me? How do we define natural resources? Anybody know? Anybody want to take a stab at natural resources? So natural resources are anything in the environment that's used by people. Anything. Do we use plants? Yep, we eat them, we wear them. You're wearing cotton. I'm wearing cotton, right? That's a plant. Do we use the animals? Yep, we eat them. Sometimes we use them to, like, we use horses to help us move things, like mules, things like that. We wear sheep wool in the winter, right? And then rocks and stones and sticks, and we use all these things, right? So anything from nature that's used by people is a natural resource. So we have renewable and non-renewable. Does anybody know the difference between renewable and non-renewable? So renewable resources are those that are quickly replaced or kind of in endless supply. So it would include things like the sun. Technically, it's not endless. One day the sun's going to explode and we're all going to die, but that's not anytime soon, hopefully, right? So you've got the sun, and then you've got things like biomass. That's what that one at the top says, biomass. That's biomass is like all of the living, you can think of it like all the plants. Like we use you can make fuel from corn, for example. People, you make ethanol from corn, that kind of thing. Waves, you can use waves to capture that motion, that kinetic motion, and turn it into that kinetic energy, and then you can convert it into electrical energy. Same thing can be said for geothermal. We can use the heat that's in the earth, and we can take that heat and convert that heat energy into electrical energy. And then wind, we convert wind energy into electrical energy. And water, hydroelectric, like our dam, we can convert the motion of the water through those turbines to produce electrical energy. So if you look at these, like the sun, the water, the geothermal, and the wave are all kind of, they don't need replacing, right? Those are things that we can use just kind of regularly without replacing. Biomass, like trees and things, logging is considered renewable because you can plant new trees, right? And they will quickly grow. Quickly, maybe it might take half your lifetime. You might not think of that as quickly, but when you compare it to things like non-renewable, it's very quick. So non-renewable are things like coal, natural gas, oil, nuclear. So oil, coal, and natural gas are all things that took millions of years to produce. So if we use them up way faster than they can be produced, we are going to run out. So that's why it's non-renewable. Nuclear is non-renewable, but the difference is it only takes a tiny bit of material to produce a lot of power. As opposed to the others, it takes a fair amount more material to produce the electrical power that we need. So let's talk about population. All right, so this is a really interesting graph. So this shows 1800 and it predicts up to the year 2100. So we would be there, right in the middle between 2000 and 2050 because we're in 2025, smack in the middle. All right, so you can see that Earth's population has grown and grown and grown, and we expect it to continue to grow and kind of top off. And the colors show different parts of the world. So Europe, North America, South America, Asia, Africa, Oceania would be like all the little islands and things like that. So what area there has had the biggest growth in population, would you say, in the last, 25 years? So from like 2000 to where we are now, what area is growing fastest population wise? This is human population. Yeah, Asia. Human population in Asia. So we have the largest populations in the world. Do you know what two countries they are? Largest populations in the world? China, India. China and India. Populations are just booming. They're growing really, really fast, right? So then Africa is having a pretty decent starting to grow, and it's supposed to grow a little more. And then you see, look, Asia, they expect Asia to drop off. See where it drops off? So that's kind of zoomed in. That's from 1800 to 2100. So we're predicting out another 100 years. But looky here, 75 years. But looky here. So this is 12,000 years, not this is 300 years of population growth. This is 12,000 years. So look all the way back here to 10,000 BC, when we see 4 million people on the earth in 10,000 BC. Year zero, 190 million people. So we've grown a lot from 4 million to 190 million. But look at that. Look right here. We're right against that 2000 because this is 12. We're right here, right? Year 2000 is close enough. We'll count that for now because we're looking at 12,000 years. If we were looking at 300 years, we could find ourselves a little better. But if you look at 2000, that's probably pretty accurate to where we are now. You can see how fast it's grown. So in 2019, what was the population of the Earth at the very top? Do you see what it says? What was the population in 2019? 7.7 billion people. Okay, you want your mind blown? In 1804, so there, that's when Earth's population hit 1 billion. So it's probably right about here. So you look at, we went in from 1804. How many years ago was 1804?
More.
Like a little over 220 years ago. So it took us from 10,000 BC to the year zero. We went from 4 million people to 190 million people, and it took that 10,000 years. We went from 4 million to 190 million. And then in the last 200 years, we've multiplied our population 7 times over, from 1 million, almost 8 times over, from 1 million to 7.7, 1 billion, sorry, to 7.7 billion. That's huge. This is what you call exponential growth, right? That's a big population boom. So pollution is often the result of human activity. Do you know what that is? That cloudy stuff over the city? What is that? It's smog. So smog gets produced from vehicles and factories. Yeah.
When I live in China, so
I was about to say, so you've been to China. What parts of China?
Beijing.
Beijing. Okay. So I have had this experience. I went to China too. When we landed in Beijing, you come in through the air. Have you experienced this too? When you come into the airport, the air outside the windows changes colors. It went mine when I was the day I was there, it was yellow. Like as we were coming into the city, the air was like a yellow smog, and instantly you could taste the air. Did you have that experience? I could taste it tasted like metal. Oh, did you? Well, I think we did Delta in, but it smelled and it tasted like metal. And the whole city is it's really bad. Like everybody walks around with masks on. Yes, that's how Beijing was. Yeah.
You can get like,
Yes, it's really bad. Everybody walks around with masks. And we had a tour guide, and she was like, "It's a shame you weren't here last week because last week was the G8 summit, which is like an intergovernmental meeting. So they had world leaders from all over the world in Beijing the week before we came. And prior to the world leaders' arrival, the Chinese government required all the factories to shut down for 2 weeks. So by the time all those world leaders came in, it was beautiful. Air was beautiful. Everything was clean because they didn't want to make a bad impression. So as soon as everybody left, started back up again, and then the smog came in. Yeah, it's gross. Ugh.
I think when you went there, the mall I think was like very big.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it was like one of the biggest of the year.
Yep. It's really gross. The smog is nasty, nasty. It is not fun. Yep. Our friend actually sent us masks. We had a friend who was living there, and she sent us masks in the mail so that we had them when we got off the plane. So this is before everybody had masks because we had not had COVID at that point. All right. So anybody want to define environmental science? You know what that is? So this is the study of how natural processes occur and how humans affect them. That's environmental science. So we want to help balance the different opinions on environmental issue so we have decision makers that weigh the costs and benefits of any proposal. So they say we want to build a bridge here across this river. Then what they're going to do is they're going to have a debate or a discussion basically about what are the costs financially and to the environment, and what are the benefits. And the benefits have to outweigh the costs if you're going to build something or create something that's going to impact the environment. So renewable resources, just a reminder, are either always available, like sunlight, water, things like that, or easily and quickly replaced, like trees. Non-renewable resources are not easily or quickly replaced, like oil and coal. Click. Suppose a town, here's a question for you now. Suppose a town wants to buy a polluted marsh area on an abandoned factory's land, clean up the marsh, and use it for a nature center. What are some of the costs and benefits of the project? Okay, this is real easy. What are some costs and benefits? Yeah. People could get cancer because, yeah, you don't know what that factory produced. That factory could produce all kinds of things, and certain things that you touch or breathe or you get exposed to when you're cleaning up can cause cancer.
Die.
You could die from it. Yeah, depending on what that factory produced and they're not saying what it's polluted with, so we don't know. What are some other costs? You girls have one? Yeah. Or a benefit. The you could lose some of the marsh. Yeah, if the marsh is polluted, but it's still there, you could lose some of the marsh to build a park, okay, or nature center.
Did it explode?
Yeah, it might, depending on what's still in it. They're gonna have to go in and make sure that everything is out of that factory. There are some places where we've taken abandoned factories and turned them into new things. Anybody ever been to like the Ponce City Market in Atlanta? That was an old factory distribution center, and that's been converted into like a big food hall and shopping area. And we do that kind of thing now a lot. So we found ways to kind of repurpose areas. But if it's on a marsh, that adds some other things. So those are some costs. What might be some benefits? Yeah, it gets cleaned up. That's a big benefit. It also gives people a place to go learn about nature if it's a nature center or to be in nature. So yeah, there are costs and benefits. You got to weigh them. And as human population grows, we're going to use more resource and produce more waste. That kind of goes without saying. More people need more resources, which means we're going to produce more waste. So we're taking things from the environment and then we're putting not so great stuff back into the environment. There's really no way around that. All right, so forests and fisheries. So forests, because new trees can be replanted to replace trees that are cut down, forests are renewable. Forests produce oxygen, absorb carbon dioxide, prevent erosion, provide habitats for animals, and provide resources to humans. So our forests are great. So here are some things that impact forests. Clear cutting. What's clear cutting? Anybody know? Do you know everyone? Clear cutting? Yeah, you take all the trees. They cut down all the trees.
What's the
So that's actually earth where they've gone through and cut out trees. So clear cutting is a forestry practice where all or most of the trees in a designated area are harvested at the same time. It's a method used for timber harvesting, preparing land for future use, such as reforestation or other development. When they build subdivisions around here, this is usually what they do. They go through and they clear cut, they take out every single tree. And then they grade the land. So the reason they do that is because it is less expensive, quicker, and easier to just take all the trees out and flatten the land and build on it than it is to work with the trees and the natural topography. So at our old house, we had forest behind us, and had been purchased by a developer, and we knew they were going to come in and buy it and make the neighborhood that was going to be behind ours. But they said they weren't going to cut anything until they were ready to build. So the year they were ready to build, they went back there and started cutting. And they left this one tree, and we were very excited because it was like a little hollow, and in it was a big chestnut oak tree. And it was probably, I'm not kidding, this big around. It was huge. It was easily 200 years old. Giant tree. It was so big because all of the nutrients ran down the hills into the little hollows, so the tree got really big. And so we were like, oh, they're going to leave that one. That's awesome. We want them to leave it. They just needed special equipment to get it out. It was so big. They cut it down too with everything else. So that's clear cutting. Do what? I would have been there all day counting lines. There are so many. I did get some pictures of it, but I didn't count them. But it was huge. So then we have selective cutting, which is just what it sounds like. Selective cutting is when you, it's also called selective logging or harvesting, and it's where they cut only specific trees and they're removed while the rest are left standing. So we've done that back here in our forest behind our house. We have selectively cut. We've kept all the hardwoods and we've kept all the flowering trees, but we've removed a lot of the little scrubby trees that block our view of the water. So we'll have the guys come in and they'll cut down like the chinaberry and there's a couple of other like little scrubby things that grow out there, and they just cut those down for us. But they leave our dogwoods because they flower and they're natural and native. And they leave our big hardwoods, like our oak trees. They take out small poplars and things like that. So that's selective cutting. And then you have sustainable yield. So sustainable yield, in a sustainable yield forest, timber harvesting, is managed to ensure the forest's long-term health and productivity, allowing for continuous resource extraction without depleting the forest. So they harvest at a rate that the forest can replenish. So what they do, you see how see how it looks different? That's because there are different types of trees planted in these different areas. So this is a timber forest that is basically a farm. It's meant for harvesting timber. So what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll mark out areas. And when they take all the trees out of an area, they'll put maybe a different kind of tree in its place. And they try to cut at the same rate it takes to grow. But do you remember a couple weeks ago when we talked about old wood in construction versus new wood in construction? This is where you get the new wood in construction from, is big forest farms like this one, timber farms. So we have different logging methods. We've got clear cutting and selective cutting when we compare those two. So your advantages to clear cutting are it's quicker and cheaper, and your disadvantages is it destroys habitats and it increases erosion. Selective cutting, your advantages is that it's less damage to the environment, but it's more difficult and it's more expensive. When you have trees in the ground, their roots help keep the soil in place, so that's how it decreases erosion by having trees. So fisheries. Managing fisheries for a sustainable yield includes strategies such as setting fishing limits, changing fishing methods, developing aquaculture techniques, and finding new resources. Limits on the number and size of catch can prevent overfishing to ensure young fish survive to reproduce. So there are a lot of places where there are rules about the size of a fish you can keep. If you catch a fish and it's under a certain size, you have to throw it back. Why might that be? What do they want you to throw the little ones back?
Keep the population.
Yeah, so the little ones still can grow, right? They'll let you catch the big ones, but they want the little ones to keep growing. And if you pull all the little ones out, they never have a chance to grow up. And some of them haven't even reached sexual maturity yet, so they're not reproducing. So if you pull the little ones out that haven't even reproduced yet, killing all the fish kids, then you're not going to get any more adult fish, right? So they have to limit things like that. So do you know where your nearest fishery or hatchery is? There's one that's about 15 minutes from here. Does anybody know? So it's right on the Chattahoochee River, and it is in Chattahoochee River Club, the neighborhood that is kind of directly across from Windermere on 20. If you go into Chattahoochee River Club and you wind through the neighborhood, there's actually little signs, and kind of over behind the neighborhood is a fishery hatchery where they breed trout in ponds and in tanks, and they release the trout into the river, and they do it, one, for population sustainability, and two, specifically to stock the river for fishermen, because we have a lot of people that like to fish the river. I've told everybody, if you want to fish the river from my house, you need waders. You can't stand on the shore and cast because your line will just go, the water moves too fast. But if you've got waders on, those big old rubber pants, and you can walk out into the water and stand there and fish downstream, you can fish the river, and they stock it with rainbow trout. It's pretty cool. So fisheries have fishing limits. So that's things like they limit your size and the number you can take. And there are regulations that restrict the number or size of fish that can be kept by an angler or a fisherman in a single fishing trip or during a specific time period. And they're put in place to help conserve fish populations and ensure sustainable fishing practices. Then there are fishing methods. What are those things called? Does anybody know what they're called? Those guys right there? Those are lures. Okay. So sometimes you can fish with lures. Sometimes you can fish with live bait. It depends. And I fish with live bait. I've never had any luck with lures, but so sustainable fishing methods prioritize the long-term health of the fish population and ecosystem while minimizing harm to the environment. So strategies can include things like selective fishing gear, like pole and line traps and trolling, which reduce bycatch and habitat damage. So what that means is, so sometimes they limit whether you're using lures or live bait. And sometimes they limit whether you're fishing with nets or poles. And so, for example, if you put a net out in the water, you're going to catch everything. That's bycatch. You're catching not just the trout, but anything else that lives there, right? And you only want the trout. So maybe the trout like a particular kind of bait. So they say, for this area, we want trout caught. So we're going to allow this kind of fishing with this kind of bait and this kind of rod and reel, and not a net or something different. All right. And then they have aquaculture. So aquaculture is the farming of aquatic organisms like fish, shellfish, and aquatic plants in a controlled environment, both freshwater and saltwater. It's essentially underwater agriculture, thus aquaculture. And it's often referred to as fish farming, and it contrasts with catching wild fish. So they have that fish farm up the road. You can fish in the ponds there. They will let you fish in those ponds. I think you may have to reserve it, but yeah, you can fish there in the little ponds. So it's important that so there's some fish we farm regularly, like salmon, for example. You can get wild caught salmon or you can get farmed salmon in the store. They look very different. The flesh of the salmon, if you see really, really bright colored salmon color, that's probably wild. And like the more kind of peachy colored salmon is usually farmed salmon. It's interesting. So biodiversity. All right. The variety of life in the world or within a particular ecosystem is biodiversity. Diversity meaning different things and bio meaning life. Biodiversity has economic and ecological value. Natural factors that affect biodiversity include climate and the diversity of niches, which are like your little areas, your little tiny ecosystems. So what's a keystone species? Does anybody know what this is? Keystone species. So a keystone species is a species that influences the survival of other species in an ecosystem. So that brings up this word. What's a keystone? Anybody know what a keystone is? Do you see a keystone in this image? So, okay, at the very top of the arch, you see that that one shape kind of like this? That's a keystone. If you take that out, that whole arch is going to collapse, right? Think about it. You take that stone at the very top out, that whole arch is going to cave in on itself. That's holding everything in place. That's called a keystone. So a keystone species affects the survival of other species. So a great example would be this guy. Y'all know what that is, right? That is the North American beaver. And it's a keystone species. It's a unique organism that supports the entire biological community. The term keystone refers to that little wedge-shaped block that forms the apex of a stone arch that holds the entire span in place. If you remove the keystone, the arch collapses. So sometimes referred to as ecosystem engineers of the forest, the beaver continuously work to create new wetlands and ponds by building dams and lodges. They're incredible workers and prolific builders, meaning they build a lot of things, carrying mud and stones with their forepaws and timber between their teeth to build well-maintained dams. These dams turn small streams into ponds and lakes, which provide excellent areas for other animals to use and thrive. Something happens to the North American beaver, it affects the whole ecosystem. Back in the pioneer days, settler days, when people were first coming into this country, they found that beaver had a great pelt that would make a great fur coat or hat and keep you nice and warm because they swim in cold water and they're fine. So their hair, their fur is really good at insulating. So they hunted a lot of beavers. They hunted too many beavers. So you have to put limits on hunting sometimes because it started to impact the environment because they were hunting all the beavers for their pelts. Types of biodiversity. Ecosystem diversity, which means that ecosystems refers to a variety of different ecosystems within a specific geographic area. It encompasses the different habitats, communities, and interactions between living biotic and abiotic factors. So when you were outside last week looking at your different areas in the yard, you were looking at the diversity within those particular little ecosystems. Then we also have species diversity. So this is different species, a variety of different species found in the same area. So ants and grasshoppers and grass and butterflies and dandelions, all different species living in one area. And then you also have what you're going to call genetic diversity. So this is diversity within a species. So that is one species of snail, but they all look different, don't they? They all have a different genetic makeup, so they all look slightly different. That's why all humans look different, right? Nope, and like unless you're identical twins, we all look different, right? And that's because we all have different genetic makeup, though we're the same species, right? So it encompasses differences in DNA sequences among individuals, leading to variations in traits and characteristics. Species loss. Okay, a threatened species is one that is likely to become endangered in the near future if protective measures are not taken. Classification of a threatened species indicates a significant risk of extinction for a species, either globally or within a specific region. So we have certain species in our area that aren't doing so well because the environment's been impacted by other things that make the ecosystem not as supportive to that individual species anymore. Maybe their food source is going away. Maybe there's chemicals that get to them. Amphibians in particular, frogs, salamanders, things of that sort, are really good at, they're indicators about pollution in the environment because their skin will absorb chemicals in water very easily. So frog populations and salamander populations are often studied to see how pollution is influencing certain water sources because they'll tell you before anything else. Then you have endangered species, and that's when it's at risk of extinction, either globally or in a specific area. So this is a little higher up on your risk level. You've got threatened, we have a problem. Endangered, we have a big problem. And then extinct, that means it doesn't exist anymore. An extinct species is one where no living members exist on Earth anymore, essentially the last individual of the species has died. There are no remaining offspring or descendants. Can anybody think of an extinct species of something? Yeah,
T-Rex.
T-Rex is extinct. That's a great one. Uh-huh. Dodo bird. Yeah. What do you think? Woolly mammoth? Yeah, they're all extinct, right? There are no more left. And lots of things can cause extinction. You can have mass extinction events, like we talked about with a lot of the dinosaurs, right? There were mass extinction events. And then you can have little small things that affect their particular ecosystem that just make it impossible for them. So, what are some threats to biodiversity? Some human activities, such as habitat destruction or habitat fragmentation, threaten biodiversity. Wildlife bridges can help prevent habitat fragmentation. So, habitat fragmentation is you've left the habitat in place, but now you've put a barrier which divide the habitat up. So, this interstate make it really hard for, say, the elk on one side to get to the other side. So the elk over here cannot mate with the elk over here. Now we have a problem. We have fragmented this entire habitat. We've made it so that these members of the same species cannot associate. So we put a road in the middle and they're going to get hit when they cross it, or some of them get hit. So then we do things like this. This is a wildlife bridge. Ever seen one? I've seen a couple. It's pretty cool. So they build tunnels on the road and they cover the top of it with the dirt and the grass. That way the animals can just walk over the bridge. They even have these for fish. They have water bridges. It's really kind of cool. So that is a wildlife bridge, and that can help prevent habitat fragmentation. What's poaching? It says poaching threatens biodiversity. You know what poaching is? So poaching is illegal hunting, and it can be hunting a species that you're not allowed to hunt. It can also be hunting at a time when you're not allowed to hunt. You know, we have a season for hunting, like deer hunting season. You ever heard that? The time of year you're allowed to go hunting, and you're supposed to be careful about what you take, you know. Why might it be? Okay, there's two reasons why a lot of people will hunt a buck over a doe. Do you know why? They're bigger. People like the trophy. They like the buck with the big rack, all the big antlers. That's one good reason. Another one is what?
More meat.
More meat. But another one is with that buck gone, that doe can find another buck to mate with, right? But if you take out the doe, you've taken out the member of the species that's actually going to carry and deliver the fawn. So some people will hunt bucks over does for that reason. It just kind of depends. But here's the difference. One buck can mate with 20 doe. So that will increase the population pretty rapidly, but one doe can only produce 1 or 2 offspring a year, where one buck can produce 20 to 40 offspring a year. So you have to be careful when you're hunting bucks because of that reason, right? So threats to biodiversity, hunting, which is what we were just talking about. So what are some reasons people hunt? Yeah.
Meat.
Food. Yep. What else? Sport. It's the other reason people do it. It's a sport, right? Oh yeah. Hunting is a practice of pursuing, capturing, or killing wild animals for food, recreation, and for trade of animal products. It's an activity with deep historical roots, evolving from necessity for survival to a sport and even a tool for wildlife management. Now, there are areas where they encourage deer hunting because we've caused a problem by building so much that the deer have overpopulated an area. So like this area right here where we live is overpopulated with deer. We've built too many houses. It's impacted their habitat, but they're reproducing at the same rate, but they don't have enough. They're getting to the point where they don't have enough food because we've taken away all of their food by building on that land. So now say this square mile of land used to be able to maintain 10 deer, it can now only maintain 5 deer, but there are still 10 deer. So the animals will start to starve or be unhealthy. Oh, thank you, ma'am. Because they have run out of food. So when that happens, they will call in hunters specifically to reduce the population. And you think, oh my gosh, why you encourage people to kill the animals? Well, they can get shot or they can starve to death. It's not necessarily great to let an animal starve to death either, right? So sometimes they'll do that. And sometimes there are organizations of archers that do bow hunting, and they call them in for that kind of thing all the time. Pollution. So pollution is the introduction of harmful materials called pollutants into the environment, negatively impacting air, water, and land. These pollutants can be natural, like volcanic ash. Volcano can cause pollution, or human-made, such as industrial waste or agricultural runoff. Remember, we saw what agricultural runoff can do in our lab with our chlorella, right? Our algae grew a lot more because we had basically what would have been runoff, right? High nitrogen fertilizer. And then introducing exotic species. What is that? That is kudzu. Kudzu was brought to America at the World's Fair in 18 something or another from Japan as a great way to introduce shade to your front porch and some ground cover to keep your land from eroding. You could sit on your front porch in the hot south and have your little kudzu coming down your little vines, making shade. Oh, how nice. Everybody wants some kudzu. People bought it up like crazy, brought it home to their little farms in the south, Georgia, Alabama, Carolinas. Yay. It has zero natural predators here, and it grows like that. It covers everything. Kudzu is everywhere. We cannot get rid of it. It is invasive. So just because the climate is similar and the ecosystem is similar over in Japan where it's from doesn't mean it should be here, right? So the introduction of exotic species refers to the movement and establishment of plants, animals, or other organisms outside of their native range. It's typically facilitated by human activity, either intentionally or accidentally. This was intentional. Kudzu was intentional. Joro spiders, we talked about before, that's accidental. They hitched a ride on a boat or something and ended up over here. Now we're stuck with them. Conserving biodiversity. So various measures can be taken to conserve biodiversity, and they might include prevention of deforestation, prevention of species extinction by poaching and killing, efficient use of natural resources, no human interventions or biologically affected lands. Ecological hotspots are areas with outstanding biodiversity or a high concentration of biological values. The values can refer to threatened or endemic species, unique ecosystems, or globally important numbers of particular species. The concept's based on an approach in which conservation activities and funds focus on a relatively small number of key sites for biodiversity. So if you live in an area that has like a lot of different species in it, they will put a lot of focus on preserving those species in that area. So we're just going to roll through these. Here are your ecological hotspots. They have a lot of biodiversity in a specific region, or they have a high concentration of a species that isn't found anywhere else. So they're significant. We have breeding programs. So breeding programs are carefully planned and managed efforts to breed animals or plants, often over multiple generations, with the goal of influencing or improving specific traits. So we'll do this if there are species that are threatened. Sometimes we will take some of those members of that species into captivity and have a program where we encourage breeding in that species and then release into the wild the offspring so that we can help grow the population. And then we have laws and treaties and local support and things like that, which can help maintain species in threatened areas. We have a problem sometimes with the dam all the way up here because way down where the Chattahoochee River ends, there are some little tiny mussels that need a certain amount of water. So back when we had our big drought about 10, 15 years ago, we had a huge drought and Lake Lanier was down to very low level. So it is our water source up here. So they kept being very judicious about how much water they let go through the dam. They were really conserving how much water they let through because they were trying to make sure that people up here had enough water. But at the other end of the river, way down in Alabama somewhere, there are little mussels that needed the water and they weren't getting the water, little like clams and mussels and things, mollusks that needed the water and they weren't getting the water. So the ecologists down there were kind of flipping out because they were worried that species was going to suffer because we had stopped releasing water all the way up here by us. So all those things can have impacts. So area, climate, niche diversity affect biodiversity of an ecosystem. Coral reefs, for example, provide many niches. You know, we make coral reefs now by sinking ships. We sink old ships because they will form kind of a natural barrier and coral will grow on it, take over and make a reef. Species with a diverse gene pool is better equipped to adapt to a changing environment. That's why species that reproduce sexually adapt better than species that reproduce asexually, because there's genetic variety in sexual reproduction. And then we have the Endangered Species Act of 1973, which protects all kinds of animals from different things. All right, so your homework was one factor that does not limit the dispersal of species is wind. A desert biome is classified as having less than 25 centimeters of rain per year with hot days and intense sunshine. This one, the auto answer was wrong. So the correct answer was grassland, which I think everybody chose, and I went in and corrected that for you. So that's mostly grassy vegetation, erratic rainfall. A rainforest biome is categorized by containing less than 100 species with 200 centimeters of rain per year. More than 100 species, sorry, I can't read. Deciduous forest biomes are classified as having cold winters, 75 to 100 centimeters. Then you got your taiga and your boreal forest. These are the ones with very brief summers, long winters, and only 40 to 100 centimeters of rain annually. And your tundra has very little precipitation, and it's Arctic and cold and has permafrost. And your limiting factors include low food supply, weather conditions, lack of space, etc. So this will be sent out in your weekly email, but these are the topics that are going to be on your Unit 2 test. If you want to take a picture of it, you can, but don't worry if you don't have your phone or whatever, because whoops, I will send that out. So these are what you will study before you take your test this week. And this will be, it'll be actually in the email, it will remind you to study for your test. Whoa, hello.
Hi.
How are you? What's up? Do you come into the youth bathroom or? Okay, let's see ya. Love ya. Bye. It's one of Claire's little brothers. So anyway, these are the things to study for your test, okay? And you can find this in your resources folder in your Dropbox, right? So you go into Dropbox, go into resources, and you'll find it. Okay, let's bring these other people in. Turn this off. All right. Y'all can come